Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on adapting the fighting fantasy rules to a Twine game which uses the Sword and Planet subgenre of science fiction. So what I'm going to show you today is two new possible beginnings, making 4 in total, and briefly discuss how the differences between those possible beginnings are going to work in the future, and very briefly show you the code, because there's not a lot of new code, but there is some. So here I have loaded up the game, and we have a new beginning, which I'll read. You could have been a great scientist if only you'd learned to wait before you announced your discoveries. Like the boy who cried wolf, when you actually did discover something, no one listened. You estimated that your machine should transport you a few feet. You were off by millions of miles. And now we have something that we haven't seen yet. There's a description of the advantage and disadvantage that the character has. In a couple of cases, it's a change to one of the statistics, skill, stamina, or luck. In most cases, it isn't. In most cases, it's something that will come up later in the game. So this one says, scientist, you are likely to understand the purpose of advanced technology, and impulsive, you find it difficult to keep your mouth shut. And when we press continue, we get something very similar to what we've seen in previous videos, but I've rewritten part of it. And I've also separated it into 2 paragraphs when it was one big paragraph. So I'll just read the bit that I've rewritten. Once you land on the planet and notice that you're standing in jungle, it says, the colours are more vivid than anything you have seen. You realise that you are seeing colours which should be impossible. There is a colour which contains both blue and yellow, and yet does not combine them into green. You see a red which is as dark as black, a blue as bright as white, a yellow of impossible purity. So I've already talked about the blue and yellow colour that doesn't become green. That was something that was done in an experiment on colour perception, which I read about, and I had a similar experience as a child. But this stuff is new. You see a red which is as dark as black, a blue as bright as white, a yellow of impossible purity. These are 3 kinds of impossible colours which I read about on Wikipedia. Obviously, if a colour was as dark as black, it would be black, and if a colour was as bright as white, it would be white. But you can trick your eye into seeming to see these colours by... It's one of those things where you stare at a field of one colour, and then you turn and look at another colour, and for a little second you'll perceive these impossible colours. Similarly, not every colour is... You can't have a perfectly pure colour, really, because the way our eyes work, you have what they call cones, which perceive red, and then you have another one which perceives... another set of them which perceives blue, and another one which perceives green. And if you, for example, if you see blue light, that will set off your green cones a little bit. And in fact, yellow we don't ever perceive directly. We perceive yellow when our green colour cones are activated, but not the blue ones, or the blue ones aren't activated very much. But again, you can trick yourself into seeing these pure colours that can't really exist in nature. Anyway, that's something I've been interested in, and I've worked it into the story. So let's have a look at another couple of possible beginnings. So this is, I won't read this one because I read it in the previous video. This is the one where you're growing up on a farm. The only change I've made to this one is that I said it was buried in the woods near your parents' farm, because I thought it was a little bit implausible that you could dig out something sufficiently that you could lean your whole body against it and nobody would notice. Even on a family farm, even if you have lots of land and people aren't going there, even if it's in the winter, that did seem a little bit implausible to me. So I thought, well, if there were woods, maybe no one goes there in the winter. You know, that might happen. But we have these other, this new format here with the advantage and disadvantage. In this case, it just says you roll an extra die to add to your stamina. So you're rolling 3 dice plus 12 instead of 2. And sheltered, you are inexperienced in dealing with people who want to take advantage of you. So you can see how that might come up. And then if we continue, we can see that we've actually been quite unlucky because the stamina's only 18. So we've only rolled a total of 6 on 3 dice. But usually it would be sort of towards the high end of the possible range or even higher than possible for a normal character. But that is Fighting Fantasy. It's very swingy in what you get. Let's try and find the other two. No, that's the Great Scientist. We've already done that. Okay. Finding the Senator's son seemed neither harder nor easier than a dozen other cases. The planet process looked to you like any other cult. Its pseudoscience seemed a little more informed than usual, but the promise of a new start on another planet was all too familiar. It was easy to join, easy to fit in. Despite their paranoia and secrecy, they never suspected you. The Senator was easily able to pay the increasing fees. You rose through the ranks, finding out what you could and encountering nothing new. Then the day came when you were taken to meet the Master, told to step into the chamber, and you found, to your shock, that their promises were true. So, this one has, you are skilled at pretending to be someone you're not, and you have seen people at their worst, and sometimes you think you're seeing it when you are not. I might rewrite that just because they both end with you're not. Now that I read it, that seems a little inelegant, but I think it conveys the information, but I think it might feel a bit awkward reading something that repeats like that. So let's see if we can find the other one. Obviously, this might take a while because it's one in... here we go. No, quite quick. The money the scientist offered was good, ridiculously good if you'd stopped to think about it, but you didn't. You needed it to be true, and so you believed it was. Well, I've read this before, so I haven't actually changed anything about that, so I'll keep that. And then I decided on homeless. You are experienced in surviving on the streets, and unlucky. Your initial luck is 6, so that's lower than any characters can be. I did think about whether that's too low, whether that's too much of a disadvantage, but as we'll see, I have a system which will allow me to automatically test the game. In other words, I can test it without having to play through it myself. I'll do that as well, of course, but I can sort of have the program sort of run through it 100 times and keep track of how the different types of characters do. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe I will raise it up to 7. And when we press continue, we see that, yeah, that the luck is 6. So the mechanical thing is working. Just on the detective or the sort of cult deprogrammer beginning, that is a combination of the process, which was a real cult in the United States, which I think Charles Manson was involved with at one point, and the Planet People, which is a fictional cult in one of the Quatermass stories, which is not Sword and Planet. It's just it's somewhat Lovecraftian science fiction, I suppose I would say. But in it, there's this cult or sect that are sort of coded as hippies, I guess, and they believe that they're going to be transported to the planet, which is this sort of heavenly world. And so I combined those two ideas. So those are the 4 beginnings. I have a couple of other possible ones that I might or might not do. One, an explorer who discovers a machine in the jungle or probably not in the jungle, because then being transported to a jungle wouldn't be such a change. So maybe they discover it buried in the desert or something like that. The other one being a person who is about to commit suicide but then receives an offer from a sinister scientist, which of course ends up transporting them to another place. That is an idea that I got from a book called The Swordsman of Mars, which is by Otis Adelbert Klein, and is a Sword and Planet novel. I didn't particularly like it. In fact, I wasn't able to finish it, but I really liked that idea. For some reason, it stuck with me, the idea of a person who was ready to commit suicide, and because they're desperate, that's a person that, someone who wants to experiment on someone would pick, I suppose. I guess that's probably where the guy that was desperate for money came from as well. It's sort of looking at it from, it's a sort of slight variation on the same thing. Anyway, there's not a lot of code, but let's spend the rest of the video looking at what code there is. So I've sort of separated the two parts of the program a bit more, make it a bit visually easier. This is all, well, apart from this, which is the sidebar, this is all the combat system, which we were talking about in previous videos, which hasn't become relevant yet. And the bit that we're looking at is over, oh, sorry, it's having, there we go. The bit that we're looking at is over here. So let's zoom in a little bit. How do we do that? There we go. Okay. So because the different characters have advantages and disadvantages, and because some of them are not encoded in the attributes, we need to keep track of those differences for when they're needed later in the story, obviously. So for that, we need a variable. And the variable I have chosen is CH. And at this stage, it is obviously CH standing for character. Now, we don't need to keep track of the advantages and disadvantages separately, because each character has an advantage and a disadvantage. So we can just, which means that a given advantage is always associated with a given disadvantage. If we had a list of advantages and a list of disadvantages and you had to sort of pick one of each, well, we'd need to have two variables. But for now, we only need one. And it is, as I said, it's generated randomly. I do intend to give the player the choice of whether to pick a particular beginning or have the game choose one. It would be nice to have 6, because even though this game is, of course, a computer program, and therefore we're not bound by the limitations that we would have if it was a pen and paper game, it might be nice in the future to make it a pen and paper game. And if we have 6 possibilities, well, that's a lot easier to do with a normal die than 4 possibilities is. In a different system, you'd have a 4-sided dice and a 6-sided dice and an 8-sided dice, etc. And so any even number would be equally easy, at least any even number up to 12. But Fighting Fantasy, because it was aimed at people who weren't sort of doing regular pen and paper role playing, I guess, it only uses normal 6-sided dice. So yeah, it would be mechanically better to have 6, but I'm not going to do it if I can't think of an interesting beginning and a interesting set of attributes. So we assign it randomly using the random command, which we've discussed before. And so down here, where we are setting a value to the variable Z and then going to $Z, we don't use a random thing here. It has to depend on $CH. So we set Z equal to the text intro plus $CH. So it'll be intro 1, intro 2, intro 3, or intro 4. And then we go to whatever the value of Z is. And then we have the 4 possibilities laid out. The only ones we need to look at are the ones that have a mechanical difference. So the person who's desperate for money has a low luck, and the farmer or the farmer's child has a high stamina. So that's done fairly easily. We just we set $AT30 equal to 6, which is this is the character who has the low luck. Now that I look at it, I think Fighting Fantasy traditionally puts initial, when it's talking about your initial luck, stamina, or skill stamina or luck, I think it puts initial in italics, so I might do that, but that's easy to do. We just use these tags. In fact, I've done it here. The I tag and the /I to indicate the end of the italic. So I think I should have done it. I should have done that. So I might do that later. But anyway, we set $AT30 to 6, and we set $AT31 to 6. So $AT is the attributes. This number indicates whether we're talking about skill, stamina, or luck in that order, starting at 1. So 3 means luck, and then 30 is the initial luck, and 31 is your current luck. And with the farmer's child, we are not setting it to a particular value because they roll an extra die to add to their stamina. So we say set $AT20 plus equals, that means set it to its current value plus whatever's on the other side of the plus equals. You can also do minus equals, which is the opposite, take away whatever's on the other side here. And in this case, it's random 1 to 6, which is simulating, of course, the roll of a normal die. So add another 1 to 6 points to the stamina, and then set $AT21 to be equal to $AT20. In other words, set the current stamina to be equal to the initial stamina. Then once we've done that, we press continue. We get to this page, and because it sets C equal to 1, that triggers in story caption the fact that it will display our skill, stamina, and luck. So that is what I have done. There's a couple of little changes that I talked about in the course of this video. I may add 1 or 2 more beginnings, just depends. But after that, or if I decide not to do that, I would like to make some notes which will make the plot more detailed, with the obvious caveat that it's a choose your own adventure. It doesn't have a single plot. It has to, it has to have variety. And in fact, if the plot, if it sticks too rigidly to the plot, then that can be not fun. That's called, being railroady or being railroaded. People start to feel like they're not really given choices that matter to the story. But there is there should be a broad outline of what happens. That broad outline will be partly based on wanting to include particular tropes from science fiction in general and from this subgenre of science fiction in particular. So that's what we'll be looking at in future videos. As always, I'm interested in feedback on my writing. I haven't written any fiction for a fairly long time, so I don't know, how good it is. Is it I don't know. Does it seem interesting? Is it easy to follow, etc.? So I'm always interested in feedback on that, or anything else, of course. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.